Welcome to the Wholehearted Wellness Podcast. As a friendly reminder, the Wholehearted Wellness Podcast is not a substitute to receiving mental and physical support from a licensed wellness provider. We encourage you to speak with your wellness provider prior to trying any therapeutic modalities mentioned on this podcast. Hey everybody, I have been looking forward to this podcast for a while because I recently went through EMDR certification and becoming an EMDR consultant, as well as got trained in Brainspotting. So I have been wanting to do a podcast with someone who utilizes EMDR and Brainspotting as well. So without further ado, I am so excited to welcome Charlotte Bienvenu. She has been a licensed social worker for over 30 years and is one of our wonderful counselors. She works with veterans and trauma, dual diagnosis, addiction. She's got a wealth of knowledge. So, Charlotte, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Aria. It's a pleasure being here.
Yes. So, for those that may not know what EMDR is, EMDR stands for Eye Movement Desensitization Reprocessing. It was created by Francine Shapiro, who actually kind of just stumbled upon it. She was on a walk in the park, just finding out some distressing information. And she found that the bilateral movement with walking ended up regulating her and helping her just kind of reframe the distorted thinking. So she ended up pretty much devoting her life to the study of bilateral movement and created eye movement desensitization reprocessing.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much how it works is somebody will pick a target that's distressing for them, traumatic, and the brain instinctively processes very similarly to when you are in REM, when you're sleeping. When you're in REM, your eyes actually go left, right, left, right, left, right, and it's accessing the left hemisphere and prefrontal cortex and the right hemisphere and the limbic subcortical area of the brain. The left hemisphere and prefrontal does a lot of more of our cognitive work, a lot of creating the narrative. It's very linear, very logical in how it thinks. And the right side of the brain and subcortical is very creative. It's all about our senses as well, and kind of reading body language and remembering where things are. So whenever somebody has something that's traumatic, it's actually stored mainly in the subcortical part of our brain. And that's where we often feel our sensations and emotions. And so EMDR does this really, really beautiful dance between the left hemisphere and prefrontal cortex, and then right hemisphere and subcortical area of the brain. And I tell people it's kind of like a garbage disposal. And you got this big piece of roast trying to put it down the sink, and you're just trying to process it and make it go down. And EMDR is kind of like the garbage disposal and breaking it down. Yeah. So I know you've been utilizing EMDR for over 10 years.
Yeah.
When somebody says, "What the heck is EMDR?" What do you tell people?
Well, I tell people EMDR is a way to allow the brain to process trauma that has not been processed.
Yes.
Because as you know, when we experience a traumatic event, it gets stuck. It gets
Yes.
stuck in the brain and we keep reacting to it.
Yeah.
So EMDR allows the brain to process the information and become more adaptive.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
trauma becomes more adaptive.
Yeah.
So it really decreases the emotional intensity around situations that we may have experienced.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Yeah, and I know that's often what they talk about is, EMDR is with the belief that your body and your brain knows how to heal itself. But sometimes when we have experiences, it gets blocked. So
Yes.
EMDR kind of opens the door to let the brain do what it naturally does.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. So brain spotting actually came out of EMDR.
Mhm.
It was created by David Gran. He actually was utilizing EMDR and was an EMDR trainer for about a decade when he was working with a figure skater. And I think it was the triple jump.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
I'm going back to the book, I'm trying to remember. She was having the hardest time doing the triple jump and almost kinda getting stuck in her head, and he was utilizing standard bilateral work with his hands, and her eyes actually locked. Not meaning like she couldn't move her eyes, but they fixed on a spot. So David Gran just went with it.
Mhm.
And she ended up having a tremendous breakthrough that she was having a hard time having a breakthrough with EMDR. So brain spotting um, still uses your eyes, but instead of the eye movement, what the therapist will do is they kind of, I call it our little like almost Hogwarts wand.
Mhm.
When I got
Yeah.
trained in brain spotting and would get my little, wand or whatever. It's not really a wand, guys. And my backpack, I would look at my husband, I'm like, okay, I'm off to Hogwarts. um, but the wand, it's the pointer. There we go. It's
Yeah.
really a pointer. You will the counselor will move the pointer on the x-axis from left to right, and the client will think about, okay, what's the trigger? What's the distressing thing? And where do I feel it in my body? I find brain spotting to be more somatic in a way. And it's interesting. The brain really does almost have a spot that
Yes.
is where the trauma's held, almost kind of like it's, oh, there's the filing cabinet.
Mhm.
So the pointer is going along the x axis, and then the client instinctively goes, oh, that's the spot. And
Mhm.
then the counselor will go on the y axis. Is it worse up here or down here? And there's a bunch of other setups with it, but what's really neat about EMDR is I know I'm sorry, not EMDR, brain spotting, is it's almost kind of like you're pressing a pimple.
Mhm. Hmm.
Where the client is focused in on the spot
Right.
and your body kind of does these waves of
Absolutely.
going into sympathetic, of really feeling the trauma, and then relief into parasympathetic, then into sympathetic, then into parasympathetic. So many words.
Yes.
But it reminds me, I know it's a gross metaphor, but like pressing a pimple.
Mhm.
So, so EMDR and brain spotting are two incredibly powerful trauma therapies. Uh, but they're different.
They're different, but so similar.
Right. Right. I know. I know. I know.
The outcome, of course, is for both is very similar.
Right.
It's just the modality.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
modality is different.
Yes. I don't know if you have found this with your clients, but I've found EMDR to be, not that you're not experiencing somatic things within your body, somatic meaning sensations in your body. Uh, but I actually find that EMDR is a little bit more visual and more almost like rewriting the narrative in your nervous system. And brain spotting, while doing the same, seems to be a lot more somatic,
Mhm. It certainly can be. But, honestly, what I've learned is not to expect anything
right?
because you never know how the brain of a particular individual is gonna process information.
Sure.
But absolutely, I think with the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system getting activated both in brain spotting, you see a lot more somatic,
Sure.
sensations coming up, but
Yeah.
we know it's stored in the body.
It's stored in the body, it's gonna come out.
It's gonna come out.
What I think is really neat about EMDR and brain spotting, too is even though you may be doing an hour or a 2-hour session, your brain's still processing for days.
After,
And
yes.
that and I think that can be so encouraging for clients.
Oh,
Like,
I
"Hey," go ahead.
yes, I'm sorry, I love when clients come to a next session, and we're like, "Wow."
Right.
Like, where we left off, uh, to where they are at the next session,
Yeah.
their brain just continue to process,
Right.
and I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure I don't know if you've had this, I have had clients where I use both.
Mhm.
And this is where, because I know some people are saying, well, which one do you prefer? Which one do you recommend? Honestly, I feel like it depends on the client and even the specific target.
Absolutely.
I have actually had some clients when they're talking, I have found brain spotting to be maybe more effective if they're feeling it more subcortically, meaning there's not as much language for it,
Mhm.
and it's just really intense emotionally and somatically. I'm like, "You know what?
Absolutely.
Let's go there."
Mhm.
Because with EMDR, you're having to figure out, okay, what's the image? What's the negative
Mhm.
cognition? Um, brain spotting, you don't have to identify those things.
Exactly. Yeah, EMDR, needs to be, as you know, pretty specific in
Right,
terms of what are we gonna target to
right.
process. Brain spotting can be very general, like, I
Yes,
struggle with anger,
yes,
I'm just anxious all the time.
yes.
You can process that.
Yeah, yeah,
So it gives you both of these modalities, it just gives you such a wide array of things to choose from,
right.
toolbox to choose
Yes,
from
yes,
to treat,
yes.
these different issues.
That is a really neat thing you bring up. I remember thinking, okay, this is so different than EMDR when I was doing the brain spotting training. With EMDR, there's a lot more steps.
Yes.
There's 8 steps within
Mhm.
the protocol, right? And there's actually even a good bit of different protocols you can utilize depending on what the issue is.
Yeah.
Where brain spotting is very fluid.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you, I have to tell y'all, when I originally did brain spotting, I was like, this is it. I don't want to like I like it more than EMDR.
Mhm.
Then I did phase 2 training and actually was like, I don't like this at all. It's too chaotic. There's no boundaries, there's no foundation. EMDR provides a little bit more,
Mhm.
I guess, structure. And then I think I kind of found my footing with both of where you recognize the benefit of each.
Yes.
But I will say, as somebody who works with trauma, I'm definitely conservative when approaching trauma therapy because you don't want to
Sure.
want to open up something prior to the body being ready to process it, wanting it to
Absolutely.
be stabilized. And so naturally with brain spotting being so somatic and
Mhm.
not having as much parameters, I thought, man,
Mhm.
is this safe? Is this okay
Mhm.
to do? Um and I know in my training there was a practicum student, which for those that are listening, a practicum student is somebody in their graduate program starting to see clients. And I thought, if I had learned brain spotting as a practicum student, I think I would have felt a little out of control.
Yeah.
But I actually learned EMDR as a practicum student, and
Did
I
you?
didn't because it was so structured,
Mhm. It is very, very structured, but what I part of what I love about brain spotting, as you talk about it being so somatic, when you have the option to engage the brain through what we call a resource spot, as
Right,
you know,
right.
and where the client is feeling calm or grounded or neutral to really decrease the activation
Yeah,
during processing. And then
yes,
you can layer it on and because we don't want to re-traumatize you
right,
while we're doing trauma work.
right.
So I love that with brain spotting. And working with combat veterans.
Yes,
It's been a really, really good resource, layering on the resourcing so that they can manage, they can they can tolerate the distress
Yes.
that comes up,
Yes.
during the process. Sometimes, with a time-limited situation, EMDR may not be
Right.
the option, if it's time limited.
Right.
But brain spotting, you can gain some traction with a short amount of time.
Yes.
So there's great things about both of them,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I'm just glad we have them.
Right. Oh, I know. I
Um,
know.
yeah, it's, being exposed to them myself and doing my own work with
Mhm.
EMDR and brain spotting
Mhm.
has really changed my life.
Ditto. Absolutely. And you made a really cool point that I remember even I think even it was in one of our first conversations because I saw that you did EMDR and brain spotting and I was like, "Oh, I wonder which one she prefers. How does she utilize it?" And I found it really cool with you working with veterans at your
Mhm.
other, area of that you work at. Oh, goodness. New Beginnings.
Heroes. Yeah,
Hero
heroes at
program.
yeah.
Yes, where you I think you have the veterans for what, 40 days?
It's anywhere from 30 to 90.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about EMDR.
Mhm.
Whew,
Yeah,
I mean, I've had clients I've worked with for 4 years, and we're
absolutely.
just beginning to touch EMDR.
Yeah.
You have to really be able to
Mhm,
be ready for it, where
mhm.
going back to brain spotting, not having such tight parameters, you can utilize it
You can.
really at any point.
You can.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even if it's a slight decrease
Mhm.
in the emotional intensity, that's worth it.
Yes.
But I've had guys I've worked with that have been there for 60 days and have really decreased significant
Yeah.
emotional distress
Sure.
related to some of the
Sure.
traumatic events.
And I think you said it well. They complement each other because I
Mhm.
think about some clients that I have who this is actually really fascinating. I think I have a couple clients that have pretty bad chronic illness, especially within their nervous system, with having dysautonomia and POTS. And I actually was a little bit more nervous for them to do brain spotting because I personally did the resource
Mhm.
and which for people to understand that it's very grounding. It's not triggering at all. But as somebody who has chronic illness, I actually was nauseous
Wow.
for 3 days
Wow.
doing the resource spot.
Wow.
Now granted, it might for whatever reason, it must have been doing some really deep
Mhm.
work, but I have a client with POTS and dysautonomia, and her body loves brain spotting.
Really?
Because she experiences her trauma so somatically,
Yeah.
EMDR is like, "Meh," but brain spotting, whoa.
You
You
just
know? You
yeah,
never know.
you just don't know
You never know.
how a client's system is gonna react.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
again, have more and more options
Yes.
to choose from
Yes.
now.
Absolutely. For those that are listening, I know brain spotting and EMDR, we just touched on it just a little bit today. I really encourage you guys, you can go on YouTube. And there have been so many people that have created wonderful videos on explaining EMDR and brain spotting. There's actually a really great video with David Grann, the creator of Brain Spotting, where he's answering questions about it. And you can see demonstrations. I know I'm a visual learner. I like to see things.
Yes.
Naturally, with a podcast, there's not a visual, but if you also just have more questions about EMDR and brain spotting and wonder, could this potentially be a good fit for me? Please reach out to us. You can call our office. You can reach out to admin, and they can get us. They can get you connected with me in Charlotte. We would be happy to talk with you more about it. We also have another therapist who does EMDR, Jackie Hidalgo. But guys, I think it's some really cool cutting edge
It
things
is.
that can really going back to what it is, where trauma is stored in the
Mhm.
subcortex, it bypasses the prefrontal,
Yes.
where we can often stay with whatever it is and overthinking and overanalyzing and trying to make sense of it and trying to stay in control.
Mhm.
But as long as we're there, you're not going to be able to touch it.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
We just let the brain do its thing,
That's
right?
right. That's right. That's right. Charlotte, thank you so much for being here today, and even just giving us your thoughts on brain spotting and EMDR. That's something I love about having Charlotte on the team is I can talk with her about these two modalities and saying, man, what have been your experiences? What would you do with this in this situation? So thank you again for coming on today.
Great. Thanks for having me, Ariel. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, you guys, take care and have a good one.